All right, where the heck is that other screen?
Anybody send the size?
Let me get to the other screen.
Very elaborate. That's how it works. Then this, and then European mainland continental stuff works good.
Was there like
Just the
6
plastic
adapters on the way or something?
So my first advice, I got jam a screwdriver in there. I was like, maybe I just do a coffee cup.
So Dave, someone's already get off the whole agenda.
That was me.
Oh, that's.
Got the whole agenda, what?
Oh, this
Just to fill it out, and that's some, I'm the only one who's really bothered by the.
That's cute.
So I guess I'm not in the right Sacm room,
Why?
because I'm an Etherpad and I
So
don't
you
see
gotta
it.
slide the whole,
Is it the 101
Chris.
room?
you gotta slide the whole.
Oh, I'm just an
I don't
Etherpad
even know if
slash
that's gonna help, but
Sacm.
really like.
Well, I think it's
We're doing
because
one-on-one?
Yeah.
Slash P notes dash IETF dash.
can you move the projector to your right? Like just slide the top, yeah.
Somehow.
And now you re-angle the projector. It's better. Oh.
Underneath, that's very funny.
But
Maybe I can't.
yeah, it's okay.
All right.
That's a little cut off.
Yeah.
It's the TF security automation.
All right, blue sheet should be going around. It's 2 after, or it's 2 after start time at least. I'm gonna get going. Okay, I need to take that menu down.
I like this lunch table. We do need to have more. Picnic. Giant pile of crap at the bottom.
That's a resolution chart.
Yeah.
Where we're going now?
This is where is your
No, it's already zoomed the whole way. We can make it smaller.
The more the merrier.
All right, here's the note well, and you probably can't read this version of it, but you should be familiar with it by Thursday. So if not, go find it online. It is
It is online.
the new and updated note well.
It is.
You use the new one, right?
Yes.
Okay.
It is the new note well.
Okay.
All right. Agenda bashing. I'm going to start with that. Would anybody like to bash the agenda?
This is not a bash. This is a question for Hank.
Yeah.
So when you and I were talking, I said, "Did you ever send me the slide? You see what I'm talking about now?" I sent you a second email about that. Do you want to present, or we take you off?
I can do some stand-up comedian.
Oh,
I have no
excellent. Okay, that was the confirmation I was looking for. Is are you going to address this?
Yeah. You either do things with slides you don't know, that's karaoke, or you don't have slides, it's stand-up.
Well, it's chair's discretion.
So I just wanted the draft addressed because it had been updated. So I
It
wanted.
hasn't been updated, but it's okay.
All right. I wanted the draft addressed. But we could take it off if you want.
Now I can talk about the future of it and about the feasibility of some
Okay.
architectural things we still need for the architecture, so yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Anything else?
All right. Status is COSWID, or not COSWID.
SWIMA. So SWIMA is in the RFC editor queue, and other status, we will, as we go through here, when we put together the agenda, basically everything that was a current working group draft, we put on the agenda in a sense, if it was something we wanted to know the status of. So, and then the other question, the other thing that was on the slides, and I think what I'm going to do is, Adam, remember the conversation I had with you about the terminology document? I said, so can you go to the microphone and tell us what the status of the terminology document is? That's the other document that was ours. It's not listed. It's not on the list. Yes. Because I asked him and he said, I don't want to present about it, but I'll go to the microphone and talk about it.
Okay, yeah, Adam Lottville. Terminology draft, a bunch of us met, agreed to put a bunch of things back, which I did, and now I'm waiting for feedback. Haven't gotten that yet, but will soon, I expect. And then we're going to go through all the issues that are in there. So the status is that we're actively working on it. We're trying to meet once a week. So
How many issues are
I think
still?
approximately 30 or so, if I remember correctly. I'd have to look in GitHub, and I don't keep that at the top of my head. But yeah,
That's fine, but 30 is a good answer.
okay. It's an answer anyway.
Yeah, but
Wow, my God. Sorry, it's already very late for me. This is Hank. Terminology-wise, there are 30 documented issues. There are a lot of more. We had a general refactor that Adam very humility omitted. He rephrased every statement so that there is a first paragraph that is a definition, and as decoupling as the introductory text says, the rest is expositional text. So Adam went through the complete document and refactored that so that Jared and I now can pick up the expositional text and refactor that a little bit. Some of it is still very rough around the edges, so that is why it requires a lot of work. But Adam did the very first big pass and cleared the way for now polish of expositional text.
so how many folks have read a relatively recent version of the terminology draft? Yeah.
You're going to read it. Okay.
Yeah. How many people are going to commit to reading the terminology draft? And can I get some reviews onto the list for the terminology draft? Because we really need to move it to last call.
Oh, no, it's not. No, it's not. No, we're not moving it to last call.
I mean, the draft has been out there.
I know the document is not going to be published. Well, not in. Huh? This is the. All right, we've got a bunch of new people. Hold on, everybody. We've got new people coming in, so let's just take a deep breath. Let the new people come in and sit down. There should be blue sheets circulating again.
There's at least one. We should probably give the other.
Oh, the other one. Oh, it's up here now. Ben, can you pass that back through? It's not pointless work.
Wait, this point, at one point it happened.
This is not a discussion for now.
Okay.
We can have a discussion later.
Okay, fair enough.
Huh? All right. So the second, well, actually, so the other piece of working group status, if you look at the agenda that we put online, I had just put the terminology in there to just get a status update of where it was, but I didn't have a presentation of it, just so we could sort of get a catch up on where it was. The second item for working group status, which is not on the slides, but I can do it now, and that is, I would like to express sincere thanks to our outgoing AD, Kathleen Moriarty. I don't know. I meant to look up the quote, and I can't find it. I don't know how many of you all have ever seen the movie The Princess Bride, but the thing about something, but I'll probably kill you in the morning. So, so when Kathleen asked me to be working group chair, she's like, "Well, we'll probably shut this down in 6 months." And then every few months it was like, "Well, maybe we'll shut you down in a few months." And so I think I appreciate all her perseverance in working to get this working group moving forward, and wish you all the best. So.
Well, thank you, and thanks for getting to the real work. So it's good to see drafts coming through.
So
Thank you.
anyway, that was my other working group status item that I was sort of hesitating on. All right, so
Heck, yeah.
hackathon. Bill.
Hi, I'm Bill. I'm going to talk a little bit about our hackathon efforts this week. Everybody hear me? Is this good?
It's
Yeah, no, Steve.
where's the actual display one? I like that you guys gave it to me this way. I just don't know how to use it. All right, somebody show me how to do that. There it is.
Ah, there we go. Oh, nice. Oh, there it is. Cool. Okay. So, oh, scrolling already. Look at that.
You're not talking fast enough.
I know. Oh, it's like on auto go. You're on.
Sorry. Not laughing.
That's fine. All right. Now, do I get to do it?
Just tell me to go ahead.
All right, go ahead. All right. So the initial sort of architectural thoughts that we had, we sort of picked up on and took a cue from the mile draft with XMPP grid and kind of used that as a starting point. And so you can kind of see what's going on here. Oh, I have like a laser pointer. Thanks. All right. So I think the idea was, you can go to the next slide, was to kind of use a workflow that we kind of have back at our office, basically to have a content repository, which in this case was having configuration assessment content be published to the PubSub topics on the XMPP server that we had configured and set up. Our assessment tool was subscribed to receive that new content and automatically perform that assessment against that content and generate the results and then publish them back to the XMPP server, a different topic on that server. And then have the another sort of results repository here, subscribe to that results topic and import that into our reporting repository there. So for our deployment process, we had an AWS instance fired up with the OpenFire XMPP server with a couple of plugins on there. Well, one plugin and then the PubSub extension also running. The HTTP file upload was basically used because our assessment content and the assessment results are actually really large XML files. So they kind of publishing those as the payload to an XMPP message was not going to work efficiently. So we got a lot of timeout issues and things of that nature. But we worked through it with the file upload plugin to kind of move that information around. And then we had all of these other stuff here on the right coded to kind of publish that assessment content, consume that and run the assessment, produce those results and publish them back, and consume those results again and upload those to our results repository. Was it too easy? It was fairly straightforward, I'll say, to do. We had a lot of it actually coded before we got here. So we used the time, go ahead, to kind of explore the other questions, because it was a very sort of specific use case that we used. And it allowed us here at the hackathon to explore the other questions and things to look at. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Bill. Can I ask a question? For
Yeah.
example, Huawei please go back to the previous slides, then previous, the first one. Yeah. Here I think you have different kind of source to collect the yarn push and IP fix. I want to know the the reason why you include so many kinds of resource to collect. So does that mean that all this hackathon work will map to the current Sacm work? In the future, we can specify the model or the way to collect all this kind of source, or it's just some test to test our architecture can work well or something.
Yeah, this is really, an initial thought that, in fact, the collection information and that sort of posture information and system characteristics, for example, could be collected from a number of different sources. Yes. Being, kind of the one that we, we're using here was the data stream section here. But these are also just other examples of where that information could come from, and that they do fit into the model of sort of being published to the XMPP server and having that information then be kind of put over a standard interface to XMPP for then continued on usage down the line.
Okay, so we can discuss offline about the more details of it. But anyway, I'm very interested about the yarn push and IP fix part because I'm from the networks device vendor.
Sure. Sure. And I think Adam will probably talk a little bit about more of that when he's going to show this diagram a little bit more later too. Okay. Yeah.
Whoops. Nancy Camlin. So I just wanted to make the clarification as being the author of the XMPP grid document, right? So the XMPP grid document, which is in MILE, and then we can show the applicability in Sacm, is to show the agility of the XMPP grid and how you can carry different information. So it's up to Sacm to figure out, as you're showing which ones. It doesn't mean that Sacm has to embrace them all. That's all.
True. Thank you.
Sorry.
I have a question.
So Chris Nacio, Carnegie Mellon. So during the hackathon, there was a bunch of different questions about kind of which XMPP JEPs or ZEPs, I have no idea how the right way to say that, are. Do you have any kind of comments you can make about that or any kind of outputs you can talk about?
Sure. We can go ahead a couple of slides.
That's unfair.
Just one clarification, for that slide. Oh, sorry, Sharif Mansour, JP Morgan. It doesn't assume that there's an agent on the endpoint. The system can assess the system in any way it chooses, so it can SSH onto it, ODBC, whatever it wants to. So Correct. It doesn't have to use XMPP.
The architecture diagram is flexible enough to support whether or not an agent is installed on there. So there are certain cases where it would be an agent. In this case, the assessment was being done. This guy here was being done locally on the machine that was sort of running that. So in a sense, it was being acting as an agent, but that's not necessarily. It doesn't necessarily need to be.
Okay, thank you.
This is Henk, and to elaborate on that, on the answer of the question, that is why. And also to answer your question, Frank, that is why there's so many initial acquisition methods from the original data source. We call this data source because there are the information elements effectively reside. And then at some point they go through the collector and become a input to the XMPP grid in this example here. Right. So this is called the data origin. So the data origin knows a lot of stuff about the thing it assesses, collected, and therefore you have this indirection. And this indirection is basically addressing your question. There are often already interfaces, and you don't want to install an agent because it's visually impossible due to policies and ongoing production line design.
Thank you. The reason why I ask is internally, some of these components were on basically the first, if not, and in some cases, second generation of them. So like the orchestrator, and the repository, and so forth. We've actually built some of them, and we're actually working on second in some cases. So we have some feedback on that.
Okay,
Thank you.
great.
All right, so answer the
I can answer your question. Yeah, go ahead. I think you can go ahead a couple.
So the question was about which JEPs or ZEPs or whatever they are,
Yeah.
XMPP might be applicable here.
Yes. Yeah, you can go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. There you go. Get a whole bulleted list for you here. So.
I didn't even look at the slide.
So, in preface to this, I'll say thanks to Dave, who represented some XMPP for us and was kind enough to offer some time to talk to us and kind of go over a lot of these different extensions to see what could and may fit into this sort of architecture as well. So I'll call them ZEPs, sure. 50 for ad hoc commands allows us to, here I got notes here, kind of allows the orchestrator to invoke collection on any entity that it has in its roster. So it's kind of presence-based as well. The capabilities allows for discovery and caching of an entity's capabilities for service discovery. The file repository and sharing. In our case, we had sort of large files that we were using for the kind of data sources to perform that assessment. Allows to find and retrieve those files using PubSub. So it's kind of in cohorts with the PubSub. PubSub collection nodes, which allows sort of a grouping of PubSub topics, by capabilities or OS, other logical hierarchies and things like that. PubSub chaining allows for sort of like federation of different PubSub nodes. If we kind of had a scenario going for a policy repository that's kind of in a remote location to a local policy repository and sort of forwarding that information back and forth through the chaining. PubSub synth allows for kind of, queuing and storage of published information. So then once a new entity is joined onto the XMPP grid, they would receive all of the notifications that were published since a previous time that they logged on. So, or kind of again, sort of presence-based. Form discovery and publishing talks a little bit about templates and results. So it's kind of a way to have maybe a policy kind of logically joined to the results that were discovered when assessing those. So you can kind of just point to that template, which would be, say a data stream collection or something like that, that defines what to collect, and then the results would be sort of linked to that. And then easy user onboarding is a good way to kind of send an invitation to an entity and then have their accounts created and presence established with the orchestrator in order to kind of enable the rest of the other pieces there. Yeah, a lot of potentials, I think. So again, the transport and again, sort of the pipes of this seem okay. So then kind of what else do we need to define? And that's sort of the components that are going to be joined to the XMPP grid and their capabilities, and then really the interface to the posture collection and assessment of those different items and the information items. And so how do we describe those interfaces and how do we describe the implementation? I think that's it. Yeah, and Adam's going to talk a little bit about the architecture a little bit later on. And I guess we hope to continue with the hackathon efforts because it's really been a lot of good information and helping to continue our stuff and continue the work down this road. So thanks.
I would like to thank you all for that, for the continuing hackathon effort. I think it's really done it's been remarkable for helping focus the working group. And I think that's, it's been a big improvement. So thank you.
Thanks.
All right, SWID. Did you send slides for this one?
Yeah, they're online. Did you download them from Data Tracker?
I may not have, but I have the data tracker up.
Yeah.
And all right, this is going to be a little bit weird. Only because of course it came up over here. Why wouldn't it come up there? That may or may not get you where you want to go. Yeah.
Hi. Can you hear me? Hello?
I think it is.
It's lit up. Am I just not speaking louder?
Yeah.
There we are. I blame Bill. He broke it. Okay. So I'm supposed to give an update on the SWIMA spec. You click on. So we requested it would be published. It underwent AD review, and we published a draft O2 based on that feedback. Next. I went through IESG last call, and oh my God, the emails. So many emails. We addressed all. That was, oh, Jesus. That was,
It's all perspective.
it's all, it was a lot more review than it got here. Let's put it that way. So Charles Schmidt heroically went through. Is he online? He's not online. So don't tell him I said that. Heroically went through and addressed all of these changes. The biggest changes, I think, were in clarifying the use of the URIs. That was kind of a big one. Rest were mostly minor. Oh, and addressing how we fit into the Sacm architecture, which was complicated because of our architecture difficulties here, but we did our bestest on it. It seemed to go pretty well. You can next us. So the IESG did, in fact, approve it as a proposed standard, and it's an INR review right now. We're waiting for some experts to review some of the new registrations. And how long does that take? Is that?
For registration?
Yeah.
It doesn't take long. The
Okay.
processing should only take 5 or 6 weeks if you respond very quickly. on
Okay.
everything.
And it's Charles, so we will. So yes. Yeah, I think that's all I had, unless there are questions about the status of that. All right, thanks. I think I'm up next again.
You are.
All right.
That's right. You guys are watching me.
Yeah. Hey, no pressure though.
Hey. All right.
Yeah, it's fine. We can just scroll down. You wanna do that?
Sure.
Okay, so this is a status update and discussions on the endpoint compliance profile. You can, it was a personal draft for just about forever, and then it was accepted as a work group document shortly after 101, I think. We accepted a lot of feedback at that time, most of them centered around the diagram. When we first published it, it was just sort of a conceptual, how can you do the work we ended up capturing in the SWIMA standard. So the feedback was that we were to up-level and sort of describe endpoint collection more generally, not focused on collecting software inventory information. So that's sort of where we are right now, working through that and the changes that we'll make to the diagrams in the document. So we published draft 01, and until 1 a.m. this morning, got no feedback on it. I don't know what you were doing. I didn't respond to them because what were you doing? We'll get to it. So we did make a first pass at up-leveling the draft and talking more about the benefits of collecting data directly from an endpoint. We updated the architecture documents to be more general so that we could allow for other forms of endpoint collection such as Yang. And then we're going to sort of try to break down later in the document into different implementations. Right now we have a lot of good information about NIA Swimma and absolutely nothing except a placeholder about Yang NetMod stuff. That last bullet is OBE now. Thanks, Chris. So these are the changes we made to the diagram. Before, it was very NIA centered, and we essentially took the NIA diagram and added a repository. That was essentially the only update we made. After discussion on the virtual interim meeting, we first apparently reversed the order of things. So instead of the endpoint being over there, it's over here now. We combined a couple of components. In the NIA architecture, the posture client and the communication clients are two different architectural components. There is no standard way of communicating between them, though, and in practice, in implementations, they are always combined as one project anyway. So we just sort of accepted that truth that, you know, while yes, theoretically they could be different in practice, and according to the standards we have available to us, they are one implementation. Hi.
Sorry for not providing any feedback. So it's a bit late in the game for this.
Not really.
Oh, okay. So we have looked at something similar, like the after. In fact, we have something like that. But the direction that we're moving towards is the orchestrator is new. What we're planning to move towards is have the orchestrator communicate directly to the repository. So if the repository wants to pull data about the information, it goes through the orchestrator. Even if it needs the raw data to munch something together, it pulls it. But the other thing that's not in the diagram, which takes a bit to consider, is asset inventories. The repository would pull information from asset inventories for context that the security assessment tools would not necessarily know, something specific to the organization.
I'm glad you bring that
thank
up. From our point of view, your asset inventory. Oh, sorry. You want to state your name for?
Oh, thought I did it before. Sorry.
Okay.
Sharif Mansour, JP Morgan.
Hey,
Sorry.
thanks. Sharif. So in our point of view, your asset inventory should not be considered separate from your security components. Asset information is a critical component to security, even though in most organizations they're considered different from a business model perspective. So a lot of our work, have you read the Swimma draft?
I'm interested in it simply
Yes.
because we depend on CPEs, and if it's going to go away and it's going to be adopted, then we really need to take that into
That's right.
account. But I will say one thing about that comment with regards to it. It's not just necessarily, we don't necessarily have access or the knowledge to that information, and we need to collaborate. So, for example, we have a concept of like findings or issues, right?
Yep.
One of them is a coverage issue. So for a security tool, find something that isn't an inventory or there's a data
Right.
quality,
And how do you
we
compare
treat
against
that as a break.
Yes,
Or
as
if
you
there's something that's not on the endpoint
Right.
that should be in there, like security control, that is also a finding. So I do agree, but in a lot of situations, that data isn't in there. And we depend on our security tools for certain things, but actually the wider repositories have more valuable information like DNS and elsewhere. It's just reference data, the idea that the repository hooks into reference data to make sure that all the information matches, and that's
Right.
also important for data quality.
So I think we're having a terminology difference. I think we're in
Okay,
complete alignment theoretically. I think according to this diagram, we'd say that your external security tools are evaluators, right? They're receiving data and making decisions based on maybe what they're observing or what they can access from the repository, and that they need to be able to input data into the repository as they see differences as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
The one last box that isn't there necessarily
Yep.
is remediation.
Yes.
So a box that, because in our object model, we also understand the difference between an asset owner and a resolver. Actually, not only that, but between a finding and a remedy.
Right.
So that we can get to the point where we can go into self-healing, which is where the automation comes in.
I'm not certain that's in scope for this diagram,
Yeah.
or this work rather, because while it's important, we're meant to be in this document focusing on the collection specifically and getting that information to other tools that would require it. So again, I think that would be a specific instance of an evaluator, but maybe what we could do on list is make a list of what those other tools, services, things that would require this information, how we should capture them better.
Yes, thank you. So not to take up too much time, I'll just make just one comment, which is at looking at the overall ecosystem, there are two things that we look at from the far side to the left and to the right. So from the very beginning to the left is the threats, right? So you have a finding, but it's specific to an attack vector, like, client side or remote code or some remote exploitation and so forth. So that tagging it to a particular finding is one thing. And then from the far end of the spectrum is also the remedy and being able to tag it with a specific issue to fix it.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you.
No, I concur. So yeah, if there's more commentary like that, we can think about. I do want to sort of capture in a very generic way that things need this information, and things should be authorized at the administrator's preference to access this information. So maybe we can talk about how to make that more explicit. Okay. I fear I've forgotten where I left off here. Oh, so we combined the posture server and communications client into one architectural element, I guess. We added the concept of an orchestrator that could communicate with the posture manager, but I'm hearing feedback that needs to communicate with the repository as well. And we captured explicitly the idea of an evaluator that is also accessing this data and can make use of it to do good things on the network. Oh, apparently I'm talking in advance of my slides. So this is some more information about the evaluator. Danny made these slides for me. I, for one, blame Danny. Yeah. So yeah, a bit more information about the orchestrator. We kept it generic since there is XMPP grid, but there are also many other orchestrator components that don't conform to that. We want to capture the idea that all of them should be able to access this information and do good things. We have a whole very blank section about netmod yang that the group wanted us to incorporate that into this work. I think that's a fabulous idea. I also think Danny and I are not necessarily the right ones to do it. I think there are a lot of people in this group that know a great deal more about netmod, yang, all that good stuff than we do. And so I'm asking for help. If the group feels that's important, he's not meeting my eyes. He's looking at the screen instead. Hey. Oh, it's Eric. Hey. Yay.
And Alex. Although Alex isn't coming up to volunteer, I see. Alex and I are Eric Voigt, authors and last call for Yang Push, and would be happy to help.
God bless you,
ping me.
Eric. Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, that'll make it easier. I thank you for that. I think it's very important we capture it here, but we just screw it up. So I would like your feedback. I think we had emailed before about the diagram. If we need to make changes to that to make it more applicable to Yang, then we should do that. All right. So next steps is to incorporate work group feedback. Right now we have a lot from Chris, and we will address those. I would like to get more if the group feels this work is still valuable. If you want us, one criticism that I saw in Chris's comments too is that we mentioned TCG, IFIMC, and IFIMV. It's the way the collectors communicate to the communications components. I'm not sure the group has the will to go through and re-standardize them here. I would like some discussion on list about whether we want to take that approach or whether, I mean, just in the way we cited the ISO SWID standard in the SWIMA document, maybe we can just cite those as possible means of communication between those two components here. But I'd like to bring that to the list and have some more talk about it.
Is that stable enough to cite?
I'm sorry?
Are TCG standards stable enough to cite?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, that was good.
More stable than anything I've written here, so you know. So yeah, okay, but we can. Is that a decision or is that a list?
That was me asking for AD advice
Okay.
on it.
Kathleen's like, don't put that on me. Thank you. Okay. Any other questions, comments, concerns? All right. Thank you all.
Where's the one from today?
Last night.
It's 01, right?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Dave Waltermeyer, and I'm here to talk about some of the work that we've been doing on the concise software identifiers draft. So since the last IETF, we've actually made three revisions, one yesterday and 2 over the last few weeks. So the first revision that we made was to make some changes to the CDDL to make a choice, to allow a choice to be made between a payload or evidence element. Now, the purpose of this is you're typically going to have one or the other, and so we tried to sync up the model basically with that concept. I noticed that there were some overlapping index labels in the CDDL. At least in the documentation for it, and so those were fixed. Hank went through the heroic effort of adding item definitions into the draft, and that work was quite a big lift and was greatly appreciated. And we updated the various references for COSI, Seaboard Web Token, and CDDL, which have progressed quite a bit since the 02 draft. Next slide. So in the 04 revision, we did some more work relating to the firmware extension, and that required some additional index renumbering. We added a section, which is section 1.1, discussing the operational use cases around how SWID tags and co-SWID tags are used in the context of the general software lifecycle. This section provides more informative information of describing really the context in which a co-SWID would be used, and we felt that was missing in the document to really help the reader understand why it matters. We added sections 2.1 through 2.7 describing the co-SWID model in detail. So we folded the item descriptions into a more explicit section that breaks down each aspect of a co-SWID and describes it in greater detail. We also created a number of IANA registries for things like entity role and version scheme values, which allows us to use index values instead of strings. That resulted in about, in some of my testing of generating co-SWIDs, that resulted in about a 50% reduction in the size of a co-SWID, simply replacing some of the human strings with index values. So that work is all done. And then this week we made an 05 revision. This was largely based on comments from Chris Anaccio, so thank you very much for providing those. So based on Chris's comments, we did quite a bit of clarification in the draft, really to make it clear conceptually when we were talking about either a SWID tag, which is an XML-based representation, or a co-SWID tag, which is the subject of the draft. The idea is that that there's an implicit information model that's shared between a SWID tag and a co-SWID tag. And so in a number of places, we were talking about SWIDs when we really needed to be talking about both. And so we added some language introducing those individual concepts, and then worked through the draft to make sure that language was used consistently. Another one of Chris's questions was a construct that we use frequently inside the draft, where we allow either a choice between a single value or an array of 2 or more values. It wasn't clear in the draft why we were doing that. It turns out that the reason we were doing that is because in CBOR, we can use, I think, about 4 bytes less data for a single value versus an array. So allowing for that choice in the CDDL definition allows data to take advantage of that kind of optimization.
There were a number of grammatical, spelling, and wording issues in the draft. We fixed a lot of those. There still are a few left that I found after I submitted the draft, so there's still a little bit more work to do there. We had failed to document the various extension points that use CDDL sockets to allow the payload and evidence portions of the model to be extended. That extension point is being used for the firmware extension that is also in the appendix, and I'll be talking about that in a few minutes. We also did some cleanup in the Markdown to convert the INET registration tables, which I was using code blocks for. We turned them into tables, which actually made maintaining them a lot easier. Thanks to Karsten for pointing that out. There's been some progress this week on a number of other drafts, so we updated the reference to the current versions as well. So at this point, yes,
Dave,
Frank.
Frank Xiaohui, a question. In this document, you use SIBO as an on-wire message format.
Yes.
I don't follow all the process in Sacm, but I want to know if there is a decision that if we need to other Sacm data in addition to this course ID something, if we decided to use all of them use SIBO, or it's just your use cases use SIBO.
So the intent of this draft was to define a single data model for a concise representation of a SWID tag. So, the working group had chosen C4 as
so just for this
the format
for this solution.
Yes.
And okay.
And so, resulting from this, we'll have both an XML format for a SWID tag and a CBOR format for one that where XML doesn't work in constrained use cases, the CBOR format will.
Yes. Yes.
Hi, this is Henk. Although one has to comment that the ISO, free available ISO 2015 current XSD is a little bit curious, and we fixed most of that stuff. So you can use the ISO XSD, but it is a little bit more unintuitive, I would say.
Hi, Sharif Mansour. So if, for example, an organization embraces sort of the ISO version of SWID, they would also need to make sure that their tooling also takes into account this for Sacm?
Yeah, I would say that if they have assets that are being managed by the organization that support both the XML and CoSWID formats, then the tooling would have to support both of those formats.
I mean, assuming right now they would have to just bypass the ISO SWID and just use this, for example. Or
I think so. The challenge that we have is it's really up to the software provider to make a choice as to what type of tag makes the most sense for the environments that their software would be deployed to. So it's largely going to be decided based on what software products you're using within the organization and what choices the providers of those software products have made.
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to avoid complexity and just keep it as simple as possible so that I can make it easier and avoiding quality issues.
Yeah.
And an example I have that I wanted to check that SWID can do is to clearly define that if I map a CVE to a SWID, that I can say it's particularly these versions, this specific version and these subversions, so that I don't tell anything below this version is vulnerable and I create false positives as well.
Yeah, so back home at NIST, my team runs the National Vulnerability Database, and that's actually a use case that we also want to support. So maybe we can talk offline about
Please,
about
yes,
that.
thank you.
But to your point, this is something that we're trying to enable through the use of SWID tags and CoSWID tags.
Yeah.
And the other point that I wanted to make also was we're trying to make sure that we keep a common implicit information model between SWID tags and CoSWID tags, meaning that the data is somewhat interchangeable between the two formats. Now, they're both based on different serialization formats. They both use different security containers. The XML version uses XML dsig. The CBOR representation uses COSI. Signatures obviously won't be portable between the two, but the data is portable between the two, which means that common code can be written to work with both formats. And I actually have some proof of concept code that I've been working with that basically takes advantage of that common information model to have an internal representation within an application that's basically shared across the two.
Okay. Thank you for pointing that out, because that is one of the pain points that we have, is the level of complexity and sometimes lack of documentation, that we're unable to adopt this information because of a steep learning curve within others. So it's not necessarily, even if the standard can provide the use cases, sometimes the steep learning curve and the documentation actually protracts from adoption.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And it would be great if you could review the draft and make sure that we're providing adequate documentation there to make sure that it's implementable.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so I have a few issues to talk through. So we're basically trying to get this draft done as soon as possible, so that we can ship it off to the IESG. We believe it's close. There are a few choices I think that we have to make that will determine whether we address these issues in the draft or whether we kind of kick the can down the road and work on another draft to actually address those issues. And so the first of these issues is in the appendix, I think it's Appendix B, we have defined a firmware extension. This is an extension that we're actually talking about in the SUIT working group a little bit. SUIT right now is kind of working out what the information model is going to be for what they're calling a manifest format, which actually aligns pretty well with something like a SWID tag or a co-SWID tag. SUIT's largely focused on CBOR format for a manifest, and so we're talking with that working group about using co-SWID maybe as a solution for a manifest. Unfortunately, there's work to do in SUIT around defining an information model. It's going to take a little bit of time to do that. That work will be great, but may delay the publication of co-SWID. So talking with Hank, we would like to suggest to the working group that maybe we move the firmware extension to another draft, which would allow co-SWID to be published, and then that draft can continue to be worked on using the existing extension points and co-SWID at a pace that's more suitable for SUIT. Are there any concerns with us taking this action? Okay, so we will remove this in the next revision of the draft, and we'll start a new, I guess. Should we create a new individual draft with that, or since the content was already adopted, should we create a working group draft?
Hank, go ahead. To me, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. I think it would be easily adopted. But do you have a name for it? Can you just do an individual draft if you don't mind?
I will. And
then
actually,
we'll do
thinking about it, one reason to do that would be we might want to take that to SUIT instead of keeping it here in Sacm.
Okay.
So doing an individual draft wouldn't hurt us either way.
Okay.
Hank, do you have any opinion?
Yeah, no, actually, I don't know where to put that draft until we have some meat to the bones. Talking about meat, I will be a co-author of the SUIT information model. So to make sure it will incorporate or be interoperable with the co-SWID, at least on the fundamental level.
Okay. Okay, so I think we'll create an individual draft, and we'll post it to Sacm to start, and then we can figure out
where to go after that. Yeah. No, I'd rather see this progress, I think, than hold it up.
Thank you. Next slide. Okay, so the other issue that we have is within both a SWID tag and a co-SWID tag, there's this linking mechanic that is modeled after the HTML link element. And the idea is that you can establish relationship arcs between the tag and something else. And that something else could be an informational resource that's available out on the internet. It could be a link to the software that the SWID tag or co-SWID describes, or it could be a link to another tag. And the way that linking to another tag works is largely through two mechanisms. One is by identifying the tag ID of the tag that's being referenced. So that allows sort of a one-to-one link between a co-SWID and another co-SWID, or a SWID tag and a co-SWID. Basically, because we have a common information model between the two, the linking can be basically irrespective of what's being linked to. And this is used to do things like just say this software requires this other software, or this patch patches this other piece of software. Those are distinct relationships that can be expressed as these links. So the first way is by referencing the tag ID of the tag, but in many cases it's really inefficient to be able to enumerate potentially dozens, maybe even hundreds of unique tag identities, because every time you release a new version of the software, it gets a new SWID tag or a new co-SWID tag, and so there can be a large number of tags that you might want to reference. So the solution to this that's used in the XML version that was defined in ISO is to use a URL encoded version of an XPath expression as a way to provide that reference. And what that XPath expression allows you to do is to select out useful data elements within the SWID tag. Is that you're wanting me to speed up?
No. Just aren't you already here?
Mostly. I wanted to actually talk about the examples on the previous slide. So the couple of examples that we have here are showing effectively a reference to a SWID tag that has an entity, which is the organization that has some role involved in producing the tag, and that entity has a reg ID that is like Contoso.com. The second example is one where there's some kind of persistent ID which can be used for grouping a collection of software. So you could say, like, my 1.0 release of this software has this persistent ID, and that applies to all of the releases of 1.0. So if you do 1.0, 1.0.0, 1.0.0.1, and so forth, they can all be referenced using sort of a group identifier for that software. So that's how these paths are used. Next slide, please. The problem is we don't have a suitable path expression language that will work with JSON and CBOR. And this is actually something that I think that's a broader problem, within the IETF right now. There's a lot of small attempts at being able to define, profiles of things like XPath. There's not a lot of interoperability in products right now that support XPath for things like JSON and CBOR, because the path expression binding for those languages is just not very well described right now. And so we're also facing that problem with co-SWID. So we believe the solution here might be to write additional drafts that address this problem. And again, by describing this in additional drafts, we can move forward with publishing co-SWID while we work to actually solve this tightly scoped problem. So what we're proposing we do is define an XPath binding for JSON and CBOR. We then write another draft that maps basically the information model that exists between XML SWID tags and co-SWID tags into path expressions, and then we write some some text that would bind that path expression to a URI form. So by doing this separately, we believe that it'll allow us to move CoSWID forward. We can basically say that a specific path expression is not yet defined in CoSWID, but will be defined later. And we believe that doing this would actually benefit a few of the other CBOR and JSON related efforts. First of all, what I'm talking about, does this make sense to do? And then if it does, where should we do that work? Do we do that here? Do we do that in CBOR? Is there any thoughts on that? And yes, Sharif.
So I also sit on the board of WASP. So if there's actually some gaps that you need help with regards to sort of missing libraries or code for that, I can reach out to the community and see if someone wants to help. The second one is, and this is on a higher layer rather than just the direct mapping, but on an unrelated note, we were looking at it from SCAP, but have you considered BDD frameworks, like behavior-driven development frameworks like Gherkin, that has a domain-specific language that's almost English readings, like given this, if this, then that?
Yeah, we haven't done that.
So there's a few organizations like Capital One and ourselves are looking into that so that we can make sort of the requirements or the English language stuff when the test scenario almost identical.
Yeah.
But it might be able to work on the inventory level, given this OS, given this version between X and Y. This. Yeah.
Yeah, we should talk more about that.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Roman Danilou, Cert. So, Dave, I just want to make sure I understand. We're talking about creating a completely agnostic mapping of everything we're doing in Sacm here to let us do XPath on JSON and CBOR-like things. So it would be universally useful to anyone doing a JSON thing or a CBOR.
Right. So I think minimally it's 2 drafts. The first would be to define an XPath for JSON and CBOR, and a second draft to kind of use that with regards to CoSWID here in Sacm.
Got it. Okay, I see the 2 drafts. I'm thinking about the first one. I think before we decide to do that here, I think we would benefit from surveying a lot of what's potentially out there and seeing whether we can get another working group to help us. It feels like a lot of good general purpose machinery, not in scope of what we're doing here. I mean, we'd love it, but
well, it's something that we need a solution here. We need something that's roughly equivalent to what the good tag standard supports with XPath. So and we've been looking around and we haven't found actually a really good solution. So if anyone has any ideas on what existing work we could leverage to do this, that would be appreciated.
Hank.
Well, this is Hank, and this is a little bit embarrassing now to say after you said we haven't found good work. Of course, there is the Yang CBOR draft that has including a XPath filter expression for CBOR.
Right,
but that was we checked that. So that's not a complete set of the things we need. So that is why it's not suitable, so to speak. It is, although a point to as a reference, you can start working off and have some lesson learned off, I guess.
Well, so personally, I want more than just a reference. I want a solution that is well described that will actually work for us.
I totally get the point, but there has been work done in XPath via CBOR. And it requires both sides of the coin. People that are experts in XML, XPath, and also in concise representations.
Yeah. Oh no.
Did I break it?
I copied notes about halfway through,
Don't
so
say
if
that
we
out
lost
loud.
that.
I was taking notes while I.
So what should we do here? Looking to the chairs.
I think what I kind of actually, I don't really want to have a discussion about where it needs to be done. I think I would start the work and then I would start the other draft and then see where it needs to go. But I do like the idea of separating things out and getting this piece moving forward.
Yeah, that way this isn't a blocker for us publishing the CoSWIDs.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Yeah, so we'll add some appropriate text describing this problem to the draft, and then we'll work on a separate set of drafts to address that problem.
Yeah.
Okay. Makes sense to me. Thank you. Okay, so given that we've kind of bike shed some of the to-do items on that are the major outstanding items on CoSWID, there are a few smaller things that we would still like to do with the draft, and we believe these things could be done really quickly. There's two other values within CoSWID that have enumerations of text values. There are link ownership and link use. So we would like to turn those into index values so that that they'll be sufficiently concise as well. That's about an hour's worth of work to do that. There's a couple of IANA registrations that we would like to do for CoSWID. So we'd like to register a media type for application CoSWID plus CBOR. So this would be defining the CoSWID fragment to use with that media type. And we'd also like to register a CoSWID content type for CoApp, which would just make it easier to transport your CoSWIDs and various protocols. And then there's a few small editorial changes that we would like to make to the draft just to improve its readability. So we'd like to add figure names to the tables and fix a few minor formatting issues just to get it ready for publication. Are there any concerns with us taking these actions? I believe that we could do these probably in the next couple of weeks and have a draft ready for working group last call shortly thereafter. Okay, so the draft is near complete at this point. If we do this one more revision, we believe we can address the issues that we talked about today, and we'll be ready to move it forward. So once we've done that, does it make sense to do a working group last call on the draft?
yeah, I think it does. So when you do an update, if you could just remind us that we want to do a working group last call, request it from us.
We'll do. Gladly.
How many folks have read a recent draft of CoSWID? 2, 3. That's not so bad, I guess. Could be worse. 4.
A recent issue, read an earlier one.
Yeah, probably like draft 4 or 3. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right, which one? What's up next? Hold on. Raleigh.
In fact, he's even heading this way. It's almost like he knows he's next.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that I'm next.
You are.
You are next.
We were double checking that you were a step ahead.
I'm still working through it. Okay.
Okay, it's way too warm in this room, so I'll try and keep it as terse as possible to keep everyone.
Should sit next to the vent, actually, which keeps turning on and giving us more heat.
Yeah.
More heat. That's what we need. Good.
It's a feature.
It's like,
Great.
Not a good feature, but it's a feature.
It's a feature, not a bug. Okay, so I'm here to do 2 things. First, I'm going to provide a brief cross-working group overview of some work that's happening in MILE. That's the Rolly draft. And then I'm going to, well, it's not a draft anymore. I'll get to that. Spoilers. And I'm also going to go over a draft that's here in Sacm that provides an extension for Rolly. So next slide, please. Text is very small, but this is a very brief overview of the status of the Rolly ecosystem drafts. A new CSERT draft extension was just posted to MILE. 2 new versions of the software descriptor were just posted here in Sacm, which I'm going to go over. A new personal draft going over discovery using DNS SD was posted as a personal draft. And there's a couple things that we're thinking about doing in the future. There's a concept of doing searching or querying, and then a JSON version of Rolly, which both Taki and Brett have expressed interest in working on, as well as a couple other people. So something to look out for in the future. Okay, next slide. The Rolly core document has been published as RFC 8322, so that has officially gone through everything and is now published. So if you are interested in reading about Rolly, which I see a couple unfamiliar faces in the crowd. Rolly is the resource-oriented lightweight information exchange. It's a information sharing standard based on the Atom syndication format. So if that sounds remotely interesting to you, go and check out RFC 8322. And thanks to anyone who in this group provided feedback, which is several of you. So thank you. The draft, it's good work. Yeah, next slide. I posted a new version of Rolly software descriptor back before the deadline, and then I posted a new version like 2 hours ago. So I'm going to talk about both of those. The first version was a series of minor grammar updates, updates to references, some fixes throughout the document, the typical stuff. The update that I just posted a few hours ago is more interesting and is what I want to talk to the group about. Next slide, please. Okay, so the software descriptor extension defines how you would use SWID tags and co-SWID tags in a Rolly repository. We have a media type field in content that lists the media type of whatever we're linking to. There is no defined media type for SWID tags, nor is there one for co-SWID yet, although Dave was just mentioning registering a co-SWID thing. So one of the solutions to this problem for us is to register the SWID tag media type in this document. This is not the SWID tag defining spec, but this is a place where we can register the media type anyway. It's unclear to me if that's something we should do in this document or if we should do it in a separate document. Brett?
So shouldn't it be the other way? Shouldn't it be application/SWID whatever plus
Yes.
XML?
Yes, other way around. I think that's fixed on the next slide. Yes, it should be SWID. And so this is something I made up. We'd have to come up with the actual format for it and figure out what we would register it as. But if there's anyone in the room who understands or who's aware of the full registration process for media types and understands if we can do it in this document just as an additional activity, that would be useful information for us. Hank?
Yeah, this is Hank, exactly. So first of all, you could do it in this document. You should talk to ISO that you're doing that because it's theirs. And also, there are two 2015 SWID versions.
Are you referring to the profile, the 8060 profile?
So what are you actually registering here? The XSD that is available? Or what is making a SWID 2015 a SWID 2015? That has to be highlighted in the registration apparently, because if you're referring to the schema that is available, there are two of them, and the actual 2015 is broken and not usable. So, and probably the 2015 current, and maybe also again talk to ISO and let them fix that before you register. Then you know what you're registering. So that's a little bit of that.
Dave, do you have a response for that?
Yeah. So this media type represents the information that is being exchanged, not the specific schema implementation. The schema itself is perfectly good at identifying its own implementation. We could do that.
We could.
I think the intent here was to distinguish between a SWID 2009 and a SWID 2015, which are distinct models.
So we could remove the date. The reason that that's in there is that the 2009 version, I think, is sufficiently different such that if I am a consumer who receives a piece of content and I read off the media type, I want to understand if it's a 2009 or 2015 so I can handle it differently.
So Brett Jordan, I think the way you would do this, because we've had to do this in other specifications that I work on, it would be application SWID plus XML semicolon version equals
we could do
2015.
parameters. Yes.
Because if you do a version parameter, then you don't get into this weird icky state where over time, if SWID ever changes, then you're like, okay, which one? And
Right.
we have to redo the media type. So
Yeah, so maybe a good solution there is to use the generic SWID, like Hank had suggested, and then use a parameter for the version. That is an option we could kind of draft and see how that works. Jess?
That's a good option, actually. I was also thinking, alternatively, if you just want to be able to capture the content of a SWID 2015 tag, then you could also cite the NISTer 8060 document that describes that content in the required fields. Maybe that's more what you're going for.
Yeah, that's another thing that we could do as well, right? We can say register the media type for SWID and then use the parameter for the actual official version, and then just in requirement text or just in the text say, hey, here's a profile of SWID that we would like to point out. Which the most recent draft has a sentence in there that says, hey, if you want to learn more, go check out NISTer 8060. We don't have any requirements around it yet. It's something we could do.
So, Dave Cridland, I'd just like to point out media types are used in two different places. They're used as they're used in responses to tell the consumer what they're about to receive, for which they can be truly thankful. But also they're used in requests to indicate what can be supported. Now, I have a feeling that parameters aren't always supported in all cases.
Correct.
Particularly in the request.
Correct.
And so given that the parameters detailing the precise schema, and I'm assuming that the schemas aren't very cross-compatible.
2009, 2015 have enough differences that it's meaningful.
Right. So we need to make sure that where there are big protocol breaks, we might need to, or compatibility breaks, I should say, we might need to be able to distinguish in the request as well.
Right. So this is the context of this, its usage in Rolly is, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Atom, but in Atom, there's an Atom content element that contains an href and a content type.
Right.
So it's in this case used. So this is kind of getting between the difference of how are we going to use it in this spec versus the implications of registering this media type globally. So we should go into that separately, I think. Yeah, that's good to keep in mind. Thank you. Okay. Dave?
Dave Woltemeyer. I just wanted to plus one the previous comment that, yeah, in content negotiation, support for parameters can be kind of hanky. And I do agree that the SWID models are from the 2009 and the 2015 versions are actually very different. They have different namespaces. They're effectively different models. So if we were to develop a media type, that would represent the model being used, we would probably want two media types for the two different tags.
Yeah, we could do that as well. Register just a whole other version. So starting to sound like there's a couple different options. We can start to compile some stuff on that. Brett?
Yeah, so Brett Jordan, I guess I'm just not aware of the content negotiation issues that people have seen because I haven't seen them. You can just put it in your accept header and you can put the parameter in, and then when you get content coming back, you could just specify the content type as, and the parameters there. If we need to do something in Rolly or some of these other things, I mean, you just call it out and say that these are what you're going to get. So when you write your software, you rip that out of the, whatever header you're using for whatever protocol you're using, and you just make use of it. So
yeah, that's one of the reasons I like the one solution that's registered as generic SWID and use the type as the parameter. That kind of addresses that as well as Hank's concerns. Dave?
This is Dave again. To Brett's point, what you explained is how it works, like how you would use the standards to express that. I think what the cautionary note that we were giving about the weirdness is implementations don't always work completely based on the specifications, and there are some implementations that can be a little bit weird on content negotiation.
So this is Hank, and one last comment on interoperability. If you've tried to diff the schema of 2015 and 2015 current, you will see it's not the same, literally. So, okay. And also, as I understand it, I just made a quick skim. I think the atom media type, which is a content element, is an XSD string. So
there's a
not
couple different
happening here at all.
There's a couple formulations of atom content. We're
Yeah.
using the out of line.
I don't know. I'm just I've never read it before. I just skimmed it. So the first thing was it's an XSD string. So I don't know. Maybe that's not happening at all.
Okay, well, we'll check that out. And what we'll do as well is do some analysis on the different options that have come up. There's some good ideas. We'll compile that, put it to list. Okay,
All
we
right.
go next.
Thanks, Stephen.
Next slide.
Oops, next slide.
So this is, I think, the last issue. So I'll finish it quickly, hopefully. The document now has a number of requirements in order to enforce interoperability around the information elements that we expose through properties, as well as a couple other places. We weren't doing this before. We realized that it's important to do this so that if I say that I'm in compliance with this extension, it actually means something rather than I read it and now my program's in compliance. Which to at least the authors implies that this document should be switched to standards track, as it is now a normative document. So that's something that we would like to do. Turn that to the chairs maybe for how we want to handle that process, but it's now a normative document and it wasn't before.
Why don't we ask a question on the list about whether people think it should be moved or not?
Take it to the list?
Yeah, let's take it to the list.
Okay.
I mean, it seems reasonable if there's normative requirements on it.
Okay, I think next slide maybe. That's it. All right, cool. So thank you very much.
Architecture?
We should look at the form stats in the rolling back because we should be able to turn them.
Yeah, I know Ben has made us much happier up here because it's
Okay, proof by concept is done. Because these are things, it's power Chelsea.
yeah, I didn't realize the controls were in the room apparently. So we have the power apparently to change the temperature.
I have it here. I just need to get it over here and that.
Okay, I'm still connected.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yep, all right, good. Adam Montville, Center for Internet Security, talking about Sacm architecture, kind of like a second one to go through, possibly. So the draft makes a couple of assertions. This first one is basically that we intend to enable a cooperative ecosystem of tools, probably from different vendors, different sources, basically, so we can't always rely on interoperability that's proprietary. Anyway, next assertion, and this may be a mistake, but I think that there's two basic perspectives in this group, that there's an architecture that's more XMPP focused and an architecture that's more, I guess, ECP focused, if you will. I don't know if that's true or not. That's an assertion the draft makes, and the rest of the draft is basically based on those assertions. So basically it presents, what if?
Excuse me, what do you mean is too old with these two kind of thing?
I'm sorry?
Be at odds with each other. What do you
At
mean?
odds with each other, like competing.
Compete with each other.
Yeah, in some sense, yeah. Like the group has a hard time understanding like which architecture it wants to go with. Again, it's a perspective thing. Maybe I'm way off base.
Okay. Okay.
Brett?
No,
Nope.
I'm just trying to. I was just setting thermostats, so now I'm trying to
get back to the chair.
Well, thank you for checking the thermostats.
They're all set on heat, and so that was awesome.
Oh, that's why. Nancy Kim Winget. So
Ben's
I guess
already
I'm
fixed
trying to
that one.
understand if it's
Ah.
where you say we're at odds. I guess I'm trying to understand from a draft perspective, I don't see them being at odds. Is it more that we need to bring a better understanding? Because from my standpoint, Rowley brings in one potential transport mechanism, XMPP grid is another. The original architecture draft, which I haven't updated forever because was meant, yeah, laugh. Okay. So No, the group decided to table it. Okay, so I'm willing to bring it back, but the notion is the architecture is supposed to enable different instantiations.
That's fair.
So it's not meant that XMPP grid is the Sacm architecture. It is an instantiation that can fit into what Sacm is trying to achieve.
Fair.
I think ECP is trying to achieve the same thing. I think Rolly is trying to achieve, but again, it's not all of Sacm, right?
Okay.
So I'm just
then-
trying to understand your comment.
Right.
Sorry,
So then maybe the
long-winded.
comment is that we have a hard time arriving at solutions. And it seems like we've got two potentially competing solutions. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I phrased it the wrong way, which is fine.
No, that's fair. And I guess I'll challenge and ask the question, why couldn't we have both ECP and XMPP grid?
Yes. To be continued here. So
Oh,
please.
I'm setting you up. How's that?
Yes, good.
Jessica Fitzgerald, McKay, NSA. So yeah, I don't think we're at odds either. I think ECP and XMPP grid are trying to solve two different ends of a problem. I think my concern, and this is maybe a meta concern, not about the slide, but about the architecture document you presented. No, not yours. Although maybe, actually, no, I'm gonna take that back. Yours too. No. It's not a bad thing. Don't worry. Don't get angry in advance of the comment. So I think XMPP grid was moved to Mile because it very well addressed the use cases Mile was addressing. And I think it is absolutely a tool that can be used to address some of the use cases Sacm has been addressing. I would like to see an architecture, though, that captures Sacm solutions we have created here, and we do have one, and then maybe also goes on to describe how we can interact with work from other work groups as well, right? So you can use XMPP grid as you describe in the orchestration. It's not a Sacm solution, though. It's a Mile solution that we can interoperate with, right? And I think that is initially too how we started with the architecture document before XMPP grid was moved out of this work group and into the other. I just think our architecture document never caught up with that reality.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
So why don't we let Adam get a little bit further through?
There's one little comment.
Okay, one
little-
tiny comment.
I've always been known to be short at the mic, so I'm vertically short. So there was an interesting talk at the lightning round at this IETF that I thought was very interesting and maybe applicable, something that we might want to look at, and that was Matthew from matrix.org. So that might be also another piece of technology that we may want to look at. So I find that to be very interesting for some of the other projects I work on and other SDOs. And it may actually be something that is interesting here. It has some industry adoption already, and it solves a lot of the problems that I think we're all trying to solve, but from different ways. And so we may want to look at that. It was a great talk at the lightning round.
Thanks. Cool. So what if both are relevant to us? This is what we were getting to. Go ahead next. So hopefully you guys can see that enough. If you can't, bring it up on your machines or whatever. But oh, and notice that there's a plus on that. So it's XMPP Grid Plus, because XMPP Grid doesn't really satisfy, I think, everything we would need, which is what Bill talked about earlier during the hackathon presentation. So there's a bunch of other extensions that we might need to bring into it. So it's not just that, we want to rely on an XMPP Grid kind of thing as a potential solution. It's that there's more to it than that. So essentially, we've got a bunch of collectors down along the bottom, and each of those collectors could just have a connector that talks XMPP plus those extensions, right, as specified, whatever those end up being, to talk to all the different components. We talk a lot about Sacm components and Sacm functions and interfaces, capabilities, I think is what we prefer instead of functions. Anyway, go to the next slide. Here's the ECP. So I wanted to address ECP to show, because it's kind of put down into a collection mechanism, because that's really where it's targeted, right, is on how to collect things off of endpoints and in a very specific way. So this is the diagram that I think Jess put up earlier. This is what's in the latest ECP draft, I think.
So there's the new bits of orchestrator, evaluator, repository stuff. Go next slide. We could connect to XMPP Grid Plus, right, from what I'm calling the posture manager, which is the repository, the collector manager, and the validator, to an orchestrator, to an evaluator. We could use the grid for that, right? PubSub over that, or whatever else we need to do. Next slide. We could go as far as saying, hey, let's not use the TNC transport at all. Why not have the agent running on an endpoint talk XMPP, right? That could be a possibility as well. So there's different ways to go about looking at that. I'm not suggesting this is what we should do. I'm just showing that there's different ways to look at how to break things up. Okay, next. I think what we'd like to do next, and when I say we, is like, so Bill and I have been doing the hackathon like this time, I think last time a little bit too. We invite others to help us, is we'd like to see how we can get, like basically look at the policy source and configuration policy specifically. So narrowing down the set of components that we want to care about so that we can learn more about how to specify those interfaces. Next slide. Yeah, so we can explore the ability for an agent to be an XMPP client. Next. We can rely on presence. A lot of the extensions that we want to use actually are based on XMPP presence, and that opens up doors to other things, which are basically some of these, which you can't read. Sorry about that. Please download the slides. For some reason,
Pretty
I was
colors.
big
Yeah, like a
screen,
screen that
know,
you could read. Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, some of the extensions, user onboarding, collection nodes for PubSub, things like that, and capabilities for sure are something that we want to do for capability negotiation or at least awareness. Next. It's a list of potential components we can start talking about. During the hackathon review, Bill talked a little bit about trying to define semantics around some of these things right now, and really what that means is, what do we mean when we say software inventory or vulnerability state or software inventory collector? Like, what do we really mean when we say those things? And then we can start looking at what workflows they cooperate in and what interfaces need to look like, and so on. So anyway, that's kind of the idea behind the hackathons that we've been doing is, let's pick one thing, let's look at it, let's learn from that and move on to the next thing. Next. So going forward, again, we welcome contributions. The real intent of this draft isn't necessarily to move forward. It's to generate discussion and try to get the whole working group kind of working as one, I guess. We definitely want to continue the exploration in hackathons, again, by picking a capability or two and moving forward with that on an exploratory basis. If we do go the XMPP grid route, we could do some of that plus work in Mile. We could do a separate thing here, or do something else entirely. It just depends. I think, and Bill may be able to comment on this a little bit, but I think that we found it easy to use the existing supported libraries that are out there to try to just do experimentation. So we weren't worried as much about the message transfer mechanism as we were about solving what amounts to the business problem that we're trying to solve, which was useful, at least for the exploration. I think that's it.
Hello, it's Joe Cridland again. This time with my XMPP Standards Foundation hat on. I was just going to say that if you guys do want to work on Sacm related or Mile, or for that matter, Mile related, and I'll repeat this later. If you want to do that within the IETF, that's fine. If you want to do that within the XMPP Standards Foundation, which is effectively the same as the IETF but with more beer, then you are also fine to do that.
Thank you.
I don't drink beer, but it is more social, I think.
So you'll be a sellout for beer, right?
Yeah. So I'm really glad to see others using XMPP and to affirm the ease. I mean, that was the whole intent, right? So, and again, I think it would be useful to show the applicability to Sacm. So I'm more than happy to work with you on on that. Right. So.
Thank you.
Hi, Adam. Sharif Mansour. Nice to meet you finally.
Yes, yes.
So could you bring back the slides on the architecture side?
First one.
One of them. Okay. So the.
I know.
So from.
I don't know if I can.
Yeah, it's fine. I mean,
This one or keep going?
yeah, one with the orchestrator, as long as it has an orchestrator somewhere. Yeah. Yeah, and any one of those. Yeah, that would do. So yeah. No, go down one slide. That's fine. Yeah, that's it. So yeah, that one's fine. Anyone, it was fine. I could have. All right. So from my side, as a piece of feedback, in general, as security, we're on the train. We're not necessarily leading it. So we're there to enable the rest of technology to be able to move at the right pace and without security. Well, finding at least helping them. On the orchestration side, there's an arrow going up and down to various integration systems. So for us, for example, we want to be the team that builds stuff for other people rather than that goes and does stuff for others. So that orchestrator will actually have APIs that will connect to elsewhere. Developers tend to use REST or other means. It's not necessarily XMPP. So that's one thing to keep in mind and keep an open eye out. And then from our side, because we're working on it organically, there are two things I have feedback on, which is mistakes will happen. Technology grows organically. We'll discover certain things. So we're keeping the APIs, the connectivity between the orchestrator and the systems, the orchestrator and the repository versioned. So we know that the data model will change over time, and we're telling people to basically sunset the old version and so on, so that the adoption just sort of moves organically. We know that we'll make mistakes going forward. So I don't know if that has taken into account. The final thing I have is, again, to minimize dependencies, we go, Jenkins or any of the build pipelines into the orchestrator. The orchestrator hits the scanning tools and so on, but also notifies the repository. The repository pulls from the orchestrator, which means that for any of the posture managers, you only have to create one connectivity. You don't need to create another connection for that. And this is mainly for an implementation perspective because of where it is right now. So thank you.
Thanks. Yeah. Dave?
Dave Waltermeyer. I just wanted to highlight what he just said, actually, which I think is something that, so you mentioned that, the posture manager serves a role in basically consolidating what is being requested of the endpoint. At least that's what I heard. And that was actually one of our early design principles in this group was, if every device in the enterprise has the ability to communicate and ask something of the endpoint, it's really easy to actually overload the endpoint. And if we have some device that's responsible for collecting, aggregating all of the requests to the endpoint, and then doing it in an efficient way that doesn't overload the endpoint, that's a desirable aspect of our architecture. A few things concerned me when looking at some of these pictures, which basically shows, a generic, communications mechanism with the endpoint, because that can very quickly result in the worst case scenario, which is, hundreds of different devices asking for more or less the same, kinds of information, directly from the endpoint, which can overload the endpoint. How do we address that as part of this architecture?
Yeah, I'm not sure that it's a huge concern for all use cases, first off. Yes, go ahead.
As an organization of 250,000 employees, yes, that is a massive concern.
Right.
And, quite a lot of endpoints. We have the, if we misconfigure something, especially with critical infrastructure, it has catastrophic impact. So, literally. So, from that side, we've made quite a lot of work on the orchestrator for calculations of the asset groups on the scheduling of those scans, and that's one of the reasons why we use an orchestrator. We never want to log into a security tool like a posture manager and do everything. We just tell the orchestrator. The orchestrator knows the blackout periods. It understands the asset groups. It pulls reference data from inventory, so understands their sensitivity, and makes the judgment as to whether that's a good idea or not, and then scales out sort of the checks. The posture manager in general can do that. You can just log into the posture manager and just scan everything under the sun. It's not necessarily a good idea, and we're putting sort of a lot of that logic into the orchestrator and just telling the dummy manager, just do what I say. But a lot of that logic and information is actually pulled from there and other reference data.
Right. So there's no doubt that it's not, or for large organizations such as yours, right, with millions of endpoints, yes, it would be catastrophic if 500 different things were pinging each of those endpoints at one time. I understand that. I just don't think it applies everywhere all the time.
Well, I would slightly disagree in the sense that you don't want your systems to go down. It doesn't matter if you're a small company or a big company. It might not necessarily be catastrophic for the rest of society, but it might be catastrophic for you. And it would be unfair to us to basically make that distinguish that it's important to be considerate, however the deployment is, and just to make sure that that's taken into account. That's all.
Okay, fair. Thanks.
Yeah.
Just on the subject, sorry, it's Dave Cridland again, and with my XMPP hat on. Actually, my XMPP hat is actually in my pocket. I could put it on. Shall I put it on? No. It's too hot to wear a hat. That's why I haven't put it on. But just on the, there you go. Just on the subject of caching and avoiding the traffic going all the way to the endpoint. Yeah, this is something that that in the XMPP world we've dealt with a lot before. So just because the endpoints are connected or addressable through XMPP does not mean that you have to go back to the endpoint every time. There's an example of this that's already come up on one of the earlier slides, which was ZEP115, which does entity capability hashing and caching that way. So these are solved problems within the application protocol design space.
Which ZEP was that again?
That was 115. Just as an example of the kind of design pattern there.
Right. That's an excellent point, actually, is that what we really get down to is that the first assertion of the draft was that we want a cooperative ecosystem of tools, right? And then later in this presentation, we're claiming that we need to start defining semantics of things and components, right? So maybe we just don't allow certain components to talk all the way down to wherever the actual collection is happening. And we're still using something as a message transfer, right? So anyway, that's just because that's a good point. It's just because they're all connected to that same network doesn't mean that they're all actually able to talk to each other, or should.
And I suppose as a more general problem or a more general point.
Can I just ask a really quick question, because just giving the time, I'm curious, as opposed to the details of this document, I was wondering if we could talk a little bit more about whether we want to move forward with this. From the perspective of we had a couple versions of an architecture, we parked it, and then we thought it might be a good idea to try and revisit it again. And I'd sort of like to answer the question about, as opposed to whether the details of this document are correct or not, whether, does that?
Yeah, I think so. So basically you're asking, instead of talking about how this would work, do we want to first decide whether we want to work on this?
Or, and I don't know that we necessarily even want to decide that today, but I want, that's if, a year or two ago, I used the term pit of despair, and then I regretted it. But if we think,
Just revitalized.
so the question is, I think we've gone for a while without an architecture document, and people have come back and said, you know, an architecture document would really help us move forward. And so I'd really like to frame this conversation today about how we move forward with an architecture document, and not necessarily the nitty-gritty details of this architecture document. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So now go ahead. So your
There's
general
just
question.
one more point, which I'm not sure I'm allowed to make now.
Oh, no.
Well, one thing that I've seen from an application protocol designer's perspective over and over again in a series of industries, from mobile to IoT, security as well, there is a tendency for a room full of security experts, because there is lots that is unique about security. There is a tendency to assume that everything is unique about security. And it turns out that most of the application protocol level problems are the same across everywhere. So, yeah, yes, absolutely, you will have concerns about caching and all of these things, but I wouldn't get too fixated about them, because they are all solved problems. And all of the other problems that you're likely to encounter from a sort of a data distribution perspective have probably already been solved.
Your problems are solved, Sharif. Security is over.
I didn't No, but I didn't necessarily raise that on the actual XMPP protocol.
Yeah, go ahead, Jess.
So I wanted to clarify about the relationship between this document and the ECP. I did read it carefully, and it seemed like what you largely had was ECP with some additional information about how you could use XMPP grid for that PubSub link. So you asked how to move forward on this. I want to propose two alternatives. One, that concept gets worked into ECP, and the other is that we create an additional document that describes how Sacm interfaces with other work groups, like in MILE, and how we can interrelate with their efforts there. And that could also capture Rowley as
Can I
well.
ask a question about that? Does that presume that the work that's going on in MILE is sufficient for the work that we would need that for?
I don't want to presume that, because it sounds like you have evidence to the contrary. I think that maybe that's a good place to capture then what you want to do in either work group, and then, you know, start capturing that content and decide where you want to put it, right?
Oh, God, no. Yes, but yes, yeah. I heard that. Oh, sorry. Hi, this is Hank again. We were participating in the last two hackathons, and we're creating workflows of data originating from a target endpoint, that was network equipment, up to the point where we come to an evaluator that just says, I got this, because we have no declarative guidance to compare to at the moment. I had back then. So we created repositories, like a target endpoint repository and an imperative guidance repository, and we used this in the XMPP grid to facilitate data collection, orchestrate data collection. So this is not according to the current architecture. That was according to the architecture before that, and not. So that's my problem. So we had a complete workflow, and it was okay. I think we used Yang push as the source. We could show the coupling of all the data representations and the complete workflow. And now I'm at a point where I don't know what we're doing again, because this is something else entirely again, I think sometimes, and I don't know how to proceed, because we lose the general concepts of, well, we have a capability to provide some information to do, and the capability to consume information in order to provide something to you. We store something, or we relay it as soon as possible. All those general concepts are now gone from the architecture, and there are very specific things we have somehow now in there. And now I don't know how to build anything anymore, because I can only build the very specific things that are in the architecture. And that is confusing to me as an individual that wants to build more flexible workflows, and that is a problem I have at the moment. So with the current architecture.
So you collected stuff using Yang push and sorry.
Yeah, come up here. This is Bill.
Sorry, this is Bill. So you collected information using Yang push and publish that to a repository using XMPP. Yes.
Yeah, we did a little more than that, yes. But that's-
Right. So I mean, like that fits into that, one of the original diagrams. So I guess wanted to clarify how you mean by things are.
Yeah, the
different.
original diagrams are not in the actual architecture.
Chris, can you go up?
Yeah, they were in the original architecture. The original.
Right. Sure. But I think that keep going. Keep going.
Am I going the wrong way?
Yeah.
Oh, you're going the wrong way.
I have no idea where we are.
That one. Yeah. So
yeah, that one is very complicated, I think.
right, but I mean, you're going through the collection process with Yang push.
Yeah.
And connecting that to an XMPP grid and storing that information in a repository. Yes. And your declarative guidance would then be somewhere in that policy section.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, this is going
So,
into the details.
so let's not delve into the details.
Yeah.
So Hank, you're concerned that this document is creating a lot of confusion.
No, it is showing what we have, which is nice. So it's like a current status quo document that shows this is how we work at the moment. This is what we are trying. This is a near-term goal, but it is not a architecture that is basically giving you guidance in the end.
Okay. So
that's
we got
small.
we next.
got that, but yeah.
This is the last question on this document. I did have a. Did we respond to Jess on her two options?
I think we take this to the list.
I just didn't know if.
No, I
Okay.
taking it under advisement. I don't
Okay.
know. Like I said, this is a discussion point, right? So I don't really know what to do next.
Yeah, it wasn't. Did we answer her question? It was more that she said that, and then there was like, there were sort of crickets, and we moved on. So,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry. So this is more feedback on the document, if that's okay, or this is more. I have to ask. the
I'd really
question short?
rather. Well, okay, make it really short.
Okay, so the feedback with regards to the architecture of Sacm is that keep in mind you might end up with a vendor that just or a solution that is just one box, and currently a lot of people are trying to just do one box. So that's one thing, and the other one is it's more of the data model that is currently a challenge because we want to have everything talk uniform with a single sheet of music, and right now there are components all around that can do some of these things, but they don't talk to each other with the right way. And we would like to be able to do that going forward. And from an architecture, that's what I would like to see. And the details and the technical architecture, the plumbing can come in as and when organically as well. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you, Adam. A couple quick questions. Yeah, I think we're ready for you. We're almost ready for your stand-up comic hack, I believe is what you said. But in the interim, just out of curiosity, how many people read Adam's document? Oh, okay, that's pretty good. How many people think continued conversation on this document will lead to productive results? Or that we need something like this? Okay, thank you. Hank?
Hi, this is Hank. This is a non-slide presentation. Sorry.
Before Hank goes on, this is Dave Woltermeyer. I didn't hear you ask the opposite of that question, though. How many people feel that they're
How many people are concerned about discussing this, about putting working group resources on this document? That's actually a very good point. Thank you. How many people are concerned about putting working group resources into this document? 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, I noticed that, Roman.
You voted both ways?
Yeah.
So you think it's an important document, but you're concerned about the...
I think it's important to talk about architecture. I think it will help frame the discussion. Can we do it productively? Is my concern.
Okay. So this is my plea to the working group. Please, let's try and do this productively.
We don't have a track record of doing it productively.
No, but it's a new day, you know. I'm eternally optimistic.
Kathleen Moriarty, one thing that has worked well with other groups is to do an architecture document at the end of the work to show how all the pieces tie together. And that's actually received quite well through all the final stages of review, at least in recent,
I think that
in the past IESG.
Right. I think the key here is I think we want the architecture document and to some extent the terminology document to both be support. I don't think we want to hold up everything else while we finish these documents. So we want to do a in parallel moving through so that we.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm not suggesting that you would hold anything up,
No,
but
no.
this can just sit there and get edited as needed. And then when you're done, something changes, you're just reflecting how all the pieces fit together.
Right. And what we've learned through the process of developing the various pieces that go together.
Right. Right. Could have an implementation section that gets deleted.
And I think just to amplify that, this is Jessica from NSA. I think we also have a track record in this group of saying, well, we want to do X, Y, and Z, and then no one ever actually brings the work. So we spend our time down a rat hole for the high-level document for work that never gets brought here. So I wonder if we should tackle the problem and bring the work you think needs to happen. The group votes on that individually and applies resources as it is needed, and then at the end.
Right. Yeah. I think part of what I was trying to do was to get to the difference between parking a document that we're ignoring versus a document that is a living document that's helping us guide our work, but we're not spinning endlessly on it. Does that make sense? I mean, I really think the hackathon and some of the smaller pieces that have been, or some of the documents that have been coming forward in the last 6 months to a year have been, I think we're turning the corner. We're making some progress. So yay us. Go, Hank.
Okay. I'm reporting on the document was a result of the hack. Can anyone hear me with the speakers? I can't hear. I have no monitor. Okay. So I'm talking about the document that was the output of the hackathon, not in Singapore, but before that. I think it was Prague. And there we, for the first time, coupled the statement message in XSD schema and the output of Yang push as an XSD XML represented data format. And to come back to that single sheet of music paper, see, we did that. We tried that. This is basically the draft. That is the coupling of Yang push with the Sacm statement structure. The Sacm statement structure is supposedly to be the sheet music that is the representation talk between or the exchange between every Sacm component. It is containing metadata. It knows about the components, and it is most certainly possible to combine every Sacm component in a single endpoint, to have a box that is all of it. It might be unfeasible in some evaluation scenarios, having the orchestrator and all the repositories and the collectors in the same box, but it most certainly was architecture-wise possible. Again, with the current one, maybe it doesn't look like it, but it certainly was the plan for a long time. To have these components like architectural components you can basically aggregate in a single endpoint that then assesses other target endpoints. And so why didn't we update the XMPP grid Yang push draft is because my confusion about the architecture. And until I know this is basically conforming with the goal we are pursuing, it was unfeasible to do an update. We presented the complete drill down, and then we changed the goal. It seems to me, and so that's why there's no update. If we agree again upon that we have multiple collection methods, we have a second component as the originator of data to the second domain, and then distribute data there between repositories, evaluators, and other components, and I'm fine with that. And then we can introduce that single sheet music basically again, which is the second statement, which is currently also defined in the, I think, also expired information model. Is it correct? The information model is expired?
I think so.
I don't know.
It is,
I think, yeah. So everything we require is basically there. We just have to use it and implement stuff based on it. So we have the generic container that is conveying data between all components, and we have a very viable source with Yang now, because pretty much every, I don't know, server and network equipment component can have a representation of Yang in some point, I guess, from netconf to Komi, whatever. And so if we are pursuing that route, that's good. I understand the sentiment that a large interest group wants an agent on the endpoint if it's a user device. And that's okay. We have the ECP model, and that is perfectly defined in that domain, even for some servers if the policy defines, but that is outside the scope of Yang push. So we have this multiple collect methods, and as soon as we agree on how to proceed with combining the zoo again, I think we can update the draft. But before that, it doesn't really feel feasible to me to put work into that. But I think we are close. I think this discussion basically showed that we all want that, I think. And so if we agree upon that at some point on the list, then we will continue that. But basically, that's why I have no slides. That's about it. Okay.
All right, thank you.
Hello. Thanks.
Those of us that are vertically challenged, we get that.
Yeah. Hello.
Could you please change it to another slide?
The other day.
Slide, the second slide.
All right, hold on.
I had the second slide first, and then this. Yes.
Okay. Hi, I'm Yue from Huawei. Today that's fine. Today I will give two presentation about the security baseline of the sorry, wait a minute. About the security baseline data model of the network infrastructure devices. Okay. The first one, the first draft is about the data model of the security baseline on the data plane in the network layer, and the second draft I will present later is in the infrastructure layer. Okay. Yeah. The objective of our work is to define a data model of the configuration and status parameters of security related functions or services on network device, and the collected parameters can the defined data model can be collected and can be used to identify the threats and vulnerabilities of the device, and then to enforce the security hardening measurements. Okay. Okay. This is the overall structure of the entire security baseline. In general, it is divided into three layers: the application layer, the network layer, and the infrastructure layer. But in this specific draft, we only focus on the data plane functions in network layer that protect the data plane traffic against eavesdropping, the tapping, the forging, and the flooding attacks. Okay. Here are some design principles of the data model. And firstly, we would like our data model to be a minimum and essential set of the security baseline information. We don't want to cover everything. And secondly, we would like our work based on the mutual work in the IETF. Actually, there has already been a work proposed in the group to show the Yang push and the Yang notification as a powerful tool to publish the Yang data stream to publish the Yang data stream.
Yeah. Okay, next. Okay, this is second version of the draft, and compared with very initial version, we did lots of editorial needs, and secondly, we largely simplify the data model by reusing and augmenting the existing data models, and then merging and consolidating the overlapping contents. These are all the sections contained in the draft. They are layer 2 protection, ARP protection, the URPF, and DHCP spoofing, the CPU protection, and the TCP/IP attack defense. And in the layer 2 protection function section, for example, we select the configuration parameters of MAC limit control and BUM suppression. And for the ARP protection section, for example, we select the configuration parameters of the ARP anti-spoofing and the ARP anti-flooding functions. And the URPF section, I think, is most changed section in this draft. We found the URPF parameters are always bounded with the QoS policies, and the QoS policies has already defined in another draft. So we just reference the draft and augment it. And another most changed section is the CPU protection. At the very beginning version of this draft, actually it has two sections called the data plane protection and the control plane protection. But later we found they actually do the same thing. That is it's just controls the number of the packets sent to the CPU to process. So we put them together to form a single section called CPU protection. Okay. This is another draft type we proposed in the last meeting. And actually, all of the sections have already been proposed in other data model. So if we don't have anything else to do, we will drop this work. Okay. Next. In the next step, we will continue to simplify the current security baseline, and we will also consider about how we can create the event stream and maybe filtering. And, next, we need to think how our work can be combined with the Sacm information model. Okay, that's it. Any question and comments?
Any questions or comments? Oh, wait, Stephen.
Just a quick comment. I actually wanted to say thank you for going and doing some of the things that the group recommended last time. We had pointed out that maybe these Yang modules had been defined in other information drafts, and I saw that you guys actually went and did that and found all of those. So I think that's a really good thing. Is that something you're going to continue looking for to try and find other overlap in other Yang modules, or do you feel like at this point everything you're doing in these documents is brand new? Is this all new now, or is this?
For the data plane, I think it's all new now.
The data plane is all new?
Yeah, but for other plane, maybe we need to search more.
Okay.
Yeah. May I add a response to you? We are sure that we search all the young data model in young category. And currently, the data model, security model, the security model in data plan are all the new things. There's no the same similar things in other document. Yeah, that's what we can show. And we also bring another document to talk about the infrastructure layer security attributes and security models. I think that's also new. We also have done this search work. So yeah, if you have found some overlapping, please tell us. Maybe we have missed something. Okay.
No, there's nothing that I was aware of.
Yeah.
So if this is all new Yang modules, from my perspective, if you're providing value to the Yang module ecosystem by defining something new, then that's probably beneficial. I'm less sold on linking all of this in tightly to the rest of the Sacm work. I'm not sure if doing alignment with something like the information model is going to be beneficial in the long run. I think you guys are doing something beneficial, and it's okay to just do that and just contribute these Yang modules and then be done at that point. I think that would be okay.
Okay, thanks. Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, how many people had a chance to read this draft? Okay.
How many of those folks are non-Huawei device vendors?
Yeah.
Steven, you're a device vendor?
Oh, you said are or not?
How many of those people are device vendors? Okay, sorry. How many of those people are device vendors who are not Huawei?
Yes, very good question. Yeah. Actually, yeah. I think this work has benefit for all the big vendors, device vendors, because take us Huawei as an example that currently for our devices we sell a lot of network devices to several big operators in the network, and we always face the requirement that our customer need us to provide some automatic way to track their security. We call it the static security posture to provide this kind of thing, this kind of service to them. So of course we are very hoping that other vendors, I think other vendors has the similar solution like us. So that's why we write in each in each draft slide that we welcome other courses from other vendors. Yeah.
Thank you. I sort of liked Stephen's description of the this useful work to be done without tying it too closely to underlying Sacm documents. I think as a Yang module in and of itself, it's a useful thing to do.
This is Henk commenting on that. If you do not tie it to the information at all, you cannot speak the same, play the same music.
Right.
You have to have some linking points in there to get the information. I
Yeah,
think.
you and your sheet of music.
Sorry, that's a good example.
Go ahead.
Okay, this is another draft about the infrastructure layer security baseline. Okay, continue. The next slide. The objective actually is similar with the previous one. We want to define a minimum set of network device infrastructure layer security attributes that can be collected by the Sacm collector and further consumed by the Sacm evaluator to benchmark the device security postures. Okay, that's next one. We have already showed this this figure in the previous presentation, but the difference is in this specific draft we only focus on the infrastructure layer. The infrastructure layer security function is a fundamental security function about the device itself and the security function that are provided by the device to the upper layer applications. Okay, next slide. Here are the 4 submodules contained in the data model. and they are integrity management, cryptography, security, the key management, and the certificate management. The integrity management is to protect the upper layer of software applications, the kernel, the early stage executable code from replacement and the tamping in the bootstrapping and updating phases. And the key point of this submodule is store of the key of trust and the supported cryptography algorithms in the cryptography engine, and the configuration parameters of the trust measurements, and we cover all the aspects of the configuration parameters. In the cryptography security, we selected the cryptography algorithms and their specific configuration parameters, and in the area of symmetrical cryptography, the asymmetrical cryptography, the hash functions, the message authentication code, the key derivation function, and also the random number generator. And in the key management submodules, we collect the configuration and the status parameters of the key to check if the key is security enough in its entire life cycle from generation to destroy. And in the last submodule, we collect the certain information and the configuration data for the device to request, to update, to validate the certificate. And also we include the CIR updates configuration data in the submodule. Okay, next slide. The next step, we need to complete this infrastructure layer data model, and we need to think about how the defined data model can be consumed by the existing protocols, and maybe we need to think about how the selected attributes in the data model can be evaluated. Okay, that's all. Any comments?
Where to? Here?
Yes.
Maybe next.
Lawful interception interfaces. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Which one?
Lawful interception interfaces. That might cause a little controversy, so I figured I would ask now, early in the working group process.
It will be not here. Don't worry. Yes, I think some of the content we just moved from some of Huawei's device white paper. So actually there are something don't need to be standard. Yeah.
Saving you headaches. Sounds like the voice of experience.
Any more comments?
Just don't go there. Just don't go there. Okay.
Finished?
All right, you're finished. Great.
I didn't find my presentation material on the website, and I just
Sent me a message. Oh, I see.
Wait,
Oh no, that's not it.
How the security baseline work?
did we miss it?
I don't know. Did we miss it? You said you just sent it to me?
Yes. You find it?
So what email am I looking for? It's not, I don't have one for right now.
Okay, Q, maybe. What, can you see the Huawei? Maybe 34 Huawei. WHAUA. Oh yeah, this one. Yes.
10:04. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't even see it. So here, maybe I should.
Oh, you want to take the?
Yeah, it might be easier if I just take it.
Okay.
Oops, sorry. 10:04. Let's hope this works.
Yeah. Hello, this is Jessica from Huawei. I'm going to talk about the recent update of the management security baseline for network device. Next, please. First, a brief recap. This document is part of the security baseline work as previously introduced, and we try to provide a minimal set of configuration and status requirements for the network devices, and a young data model is provided, and an appendix is added in this version. We will illustrate all the existing network young models and some of the reused parts. So next, please. In last IETF meeting, we were asked about the difference with I2SF work, and there are two main points. First, I2SF focuses on the flow-based NSFs, and while this document, we work on network infrastructure devices, including network security devices, and as well as the routing and the forwarding devices. And second, I2SF focus on the I2NS policy rule provisioning and the network security status monitoring. In this document, we work on the configuration security of account management, system management, and log and file system, and also check the security status of all this system management work. We try to provide the network operation security. Next, please. This page is an overview of the whole structure in this document. There are four parts as we presented at the last meeting. We have made several updates. Let's have a look. Next, please. So for account management security, the configuration security subtree was added to provide security controls on account names and password configuration. This is what has already been widely implemented in the commonly used network devices. And for the login security, two new groupings were added, and the grouping common security policy is defined for the protection from password brute force attacks, and another grouping SSH server security hardening is try to harden the SSH based connections. Besides, the AAA configuration also was hardened by several security configurations for readers and texters. And at last, a read-only subtree was added to acquire the security the login status of the remote login administrators. So next, please. And for the second part, the system management security, the authorization rules was augmented for the netconf security subtree, and also a new subtree was added to capture the current status of the available system ports, and the corresponding values can then be used to compare with the communication metrics for the system posture security assessment. Next, please. And the last two parts are the log security and the file security. For log security submodule, it is defined to how to configure the log rules and the security protections, and to check whether the some events are recorded, and whether the security controls are activated. The log record subtree is used to describe what events will be recorded, and another subtree alert notification is to configure the threshold. then can alert abnormal activities. And the third part is a log overflow action. This is about what action will be taken to deal with the log overflow. And the last part is what we have defined in the last version. So for the file security, we mainly care about the security of the locally stored files and the remote transfer. So these are the updates. Next, please. So we are soliciting comments, and we have considered about our next steps. First, we will continue refining the data model, and we will try to adapt the data model to support the combination with the young push mechanism. And third, we will try to provide the reference values that can be used for posture assessment, maybe, and point out how the reference values can be acquired. So that's all. Thank you.
Any questions? No. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's the agenda. We have 5 minutes if we want to talk about where we are, where we're headed.
Okay. So you're right. 5 minutes. I think most of this we can take to the list. We need to take a. Are you shifting around? No, you're not. Just shifting. So anyway, I think we've had a productive meeting. I think the best thing to do. The one question I do have is we have historically done virtual interims to help us keep the work moving forward. Do we think a virtual interim would be productive between now and wherever we are next? Montreal? Hum, if you'd like a virtual interim. Okay, so we will work on scheduling the virtual interim. One of the things that Chris and I haven't had a chance to do is to go back and look at our current list of milestones and update those. And so we will be doing that between now and the next virtual interim. I'd like to get some realistic dates on these milestones. Go ahead.
Dave Waltermeyer. I'm sure a few folks in this room are going to be going to RSA in April. So it might be good if we're going to schedule something to do it, at the end of April or preferably at the beginning of May. We could do a face-to-face at RSA if there's enough interest.
Oh, wait. Now he is moving to the microphone.
Sorry, Adam Monfield. Yeah, well, I'll be at RSA, and I think Bill will be there too, along with a bunch of other reps. But this will be probably second priority to speaking to members and customers. So
really shocking.
Jessica Fitzgerald McKay, say, if you guys do that, could there be a way for those of us who never get permission to go to the RSA to call in?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Any interim that we did,
only much more important people get to go to RSA from my agency. So.
In all honesty, my personal inclination would be that we do a virtual interim after RSA. I think trying at this point to try and schedule a face-to-face during RSA would be. Kathleen, yes.
Yeah, Brett Jordan. Scheduling things during RSA, for those of us that work for vendors, it's near impossible. It's literally we are scheduled 23 hours a day during RSA, so trying to do anything else would be just a nightmare. So please, for the love of all things holy, let's not, and RSA this year being pushed back a month or a month and a half, whatever, is just throwing everything off. So, obviously next year it'll be pulled back to its normal time, and the universe can continue to move at its normal pace.
Normal. So. Go ahead.
Kathleen Moriarty. I don't have any hats anymore, so I'm just curious if anyone's planning to promote this work at RSA, because it's a good place to reach the types of security professionals that might be interested in deploying and building. And
we have at least one.
Okay. Well, thank you, Adam, for all your work. I just mean promoting the work, like trying to see if people are interested in
Gauge other people's interests
contributing. You know, just when you're interfacing with other people, if they bring up something related to this,
So
it's kind of a little hint, like bring up the work, say that, you know, there's Yang modules, make sure they cover what you want. There's this, there's that, like different aspects that are of interest to whomever you're talking to see if they'd be interested to review work, expand it, implement, be a customer of it, whatever the case may be. Just kind of just putting that thought out there so this can grow. I think this work could have a lot of value, but we just have to see it expand more and get more interest. So I'm hoping those of you at RSA will help when related things come up.
Brett Jordan. Yeah, so I would follow on with what Kathleen said, that as I see in a lot of SDOs and a lot of working groups and technical committees, we are approaching what I would call a PR problem. And we need to figure out ways that we can talk about it and we can help people understand. And going into a group or people at RSA and talking about Yang models, they're not going to understand what in the FOM we're talking about. So we need to have elevator pitches that are really clean and concise, and they're in layman's terms that people can understand what it is we're trying to do and the things and the mechanisms in which that they can contribute, or they can take this and put it into their products. And what I have done for the other projects I work on is I'll go booth to booth and I'll just ask to speak to the CTO, because the CTO is going to be there, and then just say, hey, have you heard about this? But you can't talk about these acronyms that we love in the IETF and in other standards, because people don't know what those mean. And so if we could, as a group, could come up with some talking points and some PR language that people could use, that would help immensely. And then, you know, for people that are at RSA, just go booth to booth, ask to speak to the CTO and say, hey, you know, have you heard about this? What are you doing with this? How are you planning to solve this problem? And have you heard about this work that's being done? So end of comment.
Hi, Sharif Mansour, but this time as a board member of the OWASP Foundation. We would love to help. So in June, we have a 1 week long hackathon outside of London in a retreat. And we just, it's a non-conference, basically. It's just like a week-long hackathon, and then we present the output. We have AppSec EU, again in London in the beginning of July, which we present the outcomes of that, and we present it, and it's open, live streamed and accessible to everyone. So that's also a way of promoting a lot of the work that IETF in general is working on. And as an open source security group, we would really love to collaborate and build upon that, and also advocate and present it.
Okay, that's very, very good. So I think with that, we've reached the top of the hour and managed to go late. Yay! No, not you. I mean, so promotion at RSA, great. Virtual interim after RSA, great. Chris and I will take a look at milestones and send some updating to the list. Thank you all very much. I think we've had a productive session today, and enjoy the rest of your week, what's left of it.
Who's in the
Two guys from the North. Hi. Right. I think the Yang modules in and of themselves seem to be useful, and
Eric appears when the term Yang push is uttered twice in a minute, and then poof.